Have you ever had one of those days where your brain just refuses to cooperate? You're staring at the same task for an hour, thinking, why can't I do the thing? Then the next day, you're powering through 15 tasks like a machine. And here's what often happens next. The engine sputters. You're staring at your phone, or your to-do list, or that pile of laundry that's somehow grown larger. And suddenly, it feels like trying to push a stalled car uphill. The energy's gone, the focus is gone. You're stuck, and if you're ADHD, autistic, or both, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Here's the important thing. Where sometimes this is framed as a question of laziness, willpower, or bad habits, it's actually about dopamine dysregulation. Our brains don't shift smoothly from task to task or stay in one steady rhythm. Instead, we move through different states of focus, motivation, and energy. And when we don't recognize these shifts, it's easy to spiral into self-blame. Hi, I'm Essie. I'm an autistic and ADHD therapist, and today I want to share something I call the neurodivergent gear system, or NGS. It's a framework that maps out the different gears our brains move through. Each gear represents a different mix of dopamine, executive functioning, and mood. And when you learn to recognize the gear you're in, you can start supporting yourself without shame, without blame, and without the endless cycle of why can't I get it together? Because more likely than not, you are getting it together, and you're driving a different kind of brain. So what exactly is the neurodivergent gear system? Think of your brain like a car engine. To move, you need fuel, you need gears, you need traction. But unlike a neurotypical brain, which might hum along steadily in one gear most of the time, ADHD and autistic brains tend to shift up and down abruptly. We don't always get that smooth ride. Sometimes it feels like we're revving at high speed, totally in the zone. Other times it feels like the engine's cut out completely and no amount of pressing on the gas will get it going again. That's because our brains regulate dopamine differently. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that fuels motivation, focus, and reward. In neurodivergent brains, dopamine is often patchy rather than steady. Sometimes it floods in, sometimes it vanishes, and often it doesn't match the task in front of us. So instead of seeing ourselves as inconsistent, I like to frame it as being in different gears. Each gear has its own set of strengths, challenges, and moods. When you know what gear you're in, you can stop blaming yourself for being lazy, you can recognize what's realistic in that moment, and you can pick strategies that actually fit that state instead of forcing yourself into burnout. In this system, there are 4 main gears, plus the experience of downshifting when we lose focus. Let's start with gear 0. I call this the stalled gear. This is where the engine just won't turn over. You've got no fuel, no momentum, nothing to get you going. There's no energy whatsoever. In gear 0, you might feel demotivated, shut down, or numb, anxious or depressed, overwhelmed by even the smallest tasks, stuck in a loop of negative thinking, perseveration, or existential dread. It's a place where things like brushing your teeth, answering a text, or cooking a meal feel as hard as climbing Mount Everest. For neurotypicals, this can look like procrastination. But for us, it's neurology. When the dopamine just isn't there, executive functioning collapses. Planning, prioritizing, even starting a task feels impossible. Here's an example. You know you need to do the laundry. You've known for days. But every time you look at the pile, it feels like a wall you can't climb. You tell yourself, just do it, but your body doesn't move. Instead, you might sink into your phone or just sit frozen, spiraling with guilt about not doing it. And here's the worst part. Gear 0 is often the most shame-inducing gear. People around us may say, just get up and do it. And we beat ourselves up with the same thought. But shame doesn't restart the engine, it only digs us deeper. That's why it's so important to recognize when you're in gear 0. It's not a moral failing, but more so a signal. My brain is out of fuel, I need compassion, and gentle nudges, not pressure. We'll talk later about strategies for shifting up, but for now, just know this. If you're in gear 0, you're stalled, and stalled engines simply need the right spark to get going. If gear 0 is the I can't move at all state, then gear 1 is idling. The engine's running, but the car isn't going anywhere. You're not fully shut down, but you're not productive either. You might feel restless, uncomfortable, vaguely guilty, but still unable to start. This is the torture chamber of executive dysfunction. You've got just enough awareness to know that something needs doing, but not enough dopamine to actually do it. And that mismatch creates this awful feeling of buzzing tension in your body. In Gear 1, you might start and abandon 5 different tasks in 10 minutes, open your laptop, stare at the screen, and immediately check your phone. Putter around your room, picking things up and putting them back down. Feel too wired to rest, but too scattered to focus. Here's what it might look like. You might sit down to pay bills, but suddenly remember you meant to reply to that email, which reminds you to check your calendar, which leads to browsing new planners online, and now it's 45 minutes later and nothing's been done. This is also prime territory for dopamine farming, those activities that give you little jolts of stimulation without requiring much effort. You might find yourself doom scrolling, snacking endlessly without tasting anything, reorganizing your workspace for the 6th time this month, binge watching social media videos that you're not even enjoying. Now let's pause here and say something important. Again, these behaviors are not so much character flaws as they are coping strategies. They're your brain's way of saying, I need more dopamine, and this is the best I can find right now. And here's the painful part. Gear 1 can be emotionally brutal, because from the outside you look like you're just wasting time, while on the inside, that inner critic is loud. You have time. Why aren't you using it? You're just lazy. You always sabotage yourself. And none of that is true. What is actually happening is this. Your brain is stuck in a low dopamine state where intention and action don't connect. And that gap between I want to and I can feels agonizing. This is also where a lot of rumination and perseveration can show up, especially for ADHDers. You might replay something embarrassing you said last week, or worry obsessively about something that hasn't happened yet. You're doing mental gymnastics to feel like you're being productive because your body can't engage with the real task. So how do we support ourselves in Gear 1? The key here is gentle activation, not pressure, not productivity shame, but small manageable nudges. Try body doubling, doing tasks while someone else is present, timers, I'll do this for 5 minutes, then I can stop, permission, letting yourself start messily or incompletely. Instead of trying to leap from 1 to 3, focus on shifting from 1 to 2, from restless to engaged, from scattered to slightly focused. Because once you're in motion, it gets easier to stay in motion. And if you slide back to Gear 0 sometimes, that's okay. That's part of the system too. It's all about learning the rhythm of your brain. So you've managed to get started. Maybe it was a small win. You brushed your teeth, replied to that email, opened the document that's been haunting you all week. It might not feel like much, but something clicked into place. You're in Gear 2. Cruising. This is the gear where things feel okay. Not amazing, not terrible, just possible. You might not be bursting with energy, but you're engaged. There's enough dopamine to stay present, enough focus to keep going, and maybe, just maybe, you're starting to feel a little competent again. In Gear 2, you might get through a few tasks with only mild resistance, move between activities without totally losing steam, feel steady but still distractible. Notice your mood is fine, or maybe even a little upbeat. Think of this as the low friction gear. The wheels are turning, there's motion, but it's still delicate. You can get things done as long as nothing interrupts your rhythm. This is often where ADHDers say, I'm functioning, but I know it could go either way. Maybe you're cleaning the kitchen, listening to music, and kind of vibing, but then your phone buzzes. You look at it, and 30 minutes disappear. Now you're back in Gear 1, maybe even Gear 0. That's because Gear 2 is inherently unstable. It's transitional. You're not stuck anymore, but you're not fully in the zone either. You're cruising at a manageable pace, but it doesn't take much to knock you off track. This is why it's such a powerful moment to intentionally support your focus, to lock in the gains you've made without overwhelming yourself. Here are a few ways to stabilize in Gear 2. Set a simple structure, not a rigid schedule, but a loose game plan. Use soft accountability, check-ins with a friend, body doubling, or even a platform like FocusMate. Lean into flow activities. If a certain kind of task keeps you going, ride that wave. It doesn't have to be the most productive thing, it just has to keep the engine running. And this is important. Gear 2 is often where the inner critic gets quiet, but is still very much present. You might hear it whisper, Okay, sure, you're doing stuff, but it's not the right stuff. This is too slow. You should be further along by now. You're barely keeping up. Don't let that voice rob you of this moment. Your emotion, your showing up, that's worth celebrating. Cruising may not feel dramatic, but it's where the most sustainable progress happens. Gear 3 is the gear everyone thinks they should be in all the time. The magical state of flow, laser focus, productivity, creativity, clarity. Welcome to overdrive. This is when the dopamine hits just right. You're locked in, you're flying through tasks, you finally feel like yourself again, maybe even your best self. In this gear, you might finish hours of work in what feels like minutes. Forget to eat, drink, or pee because you're so deep in it. Feel sharp, confident, efficient, even joyful. Say things like, I don't want to stop, I'm finally making progress. This is the hyperfocus gear, the I'm in the zone gear, and when you're here, it can feel like a superpower. That's why so many ADHDers get labeled as inconsistent, because sometimes we're on fire, and sometimes we're stalled. But what people don't see is that we don't choose when this gear kicks in. Overdrive can happen when there's urgency, hello deadline adrenaline, novelty, something new and exciting, passion, a deep personal interest, or pressure, aka panic productivity. Many of us don't enter Gear 3 because we're disciplined, but because our brain is suddenly getting enough dopamine to stay locked onto a target. And here's what's tricky about Gear 3. It feels so good we don't want to stop, but we often don't know how to stop because we've been starved of this kind of clarity and focus. So when it finally shows up, we grab it like a lifeline. You might tell yourself, let me just finish this one thing. I can rest later. I have to take advantage of this while it lasts. And I get it. I've done it too. But here's the thing. Gear 3 is not a sustainable way to live. It's like flooring the gas pedal and pretending your engine won't overheat. Eventually, you hit a wall, your body shuts down, the brain fog rolls in, and suddenly you're back in Gear 1, or worse, Gear 0, wondering what went wrong. That's why one of the most powerful things you can do in overdrive is to build in breaks and exits. Set timers, schedule breaks, leave post-it notes that say, future me, you deserve rest too. You don't have to slam on the brakes, but you do have to slow down gently before your brain does it for you. And when people say things like, why can't you be like this all the time? Remind yourself, this is a peak state, not a baseline. It's a burst, not a blueprint. And just because you can operate here doesn't mean you should live here. Gear 3 is beautiful, but it's not the goal. Balance is. So what happens after Gear 3? You were flying, focused, flowing, alive. And then suddenly it's gone. The words stop coming, the screen blurs, the motivation disappears like smoke. You stare into space and think, wait, what just happened? I was doing so well. Why can't I get back into it? This is what I call downshifting, and it's one of the most disorienting parts of being neurodivergent. It can happen internally, like when your dopamine just runs out, or your executive functioning hits capacity. And it can also be external, when something interrupts your flow. A noise, a notification, a knock on the door. Suddenly you're yanked out of focus like somebody cut the power. This can feel like losing track of your thoughts mid-task, feeling emotionally numb or irritated for no clear reason, hitting a wall physically, mentally, or emotionally. And it often triggers panic. Did I do something wrong? Why can't I push through? I must be sabotaging myself again. More likely than not, you've simply burned through a lot of dopamine, mental energy, or emotional reserves, and your system is trying to recover. It's like a runner who sprinted full speed and then collapsed at the finish line. And because ADHD and autistic brains often don't feel those limits until it's too late, the downshift can feel sudden and often emotionally jarring. You might feel guilt. I should still be working. Confusion. Where did the motivation go? Shame. This always happens. I ruin everything. But none of that is true. It's just your nervous system doing its best to recalibrate. What helps in this moment is transition awareness. Knowing, oh, this is a downshift. It's not my fault. It's not a failure. It's a phase change. So instead of forcing a bounce back, try this. Breathe and name it. This is just a downshift. Naming it reduces the shame spiral and invites compassion in. Choose care overcorrection. Instead of asking, how do I get back to work? Try asking, what does my brain need right now? What would comfort look like? What would comfort look like in this moment? Can I give myself permission to pause? This is the part many neurodivergents so rarely get modeled: how to stop without self-blame. It's okay to be done. It's okay to rest before you feel finished. It's okay to need softness more than solutions. So what gear are you in right now? Are you stalled in gear 0, struggling to lift yourself off the couch? Idling in gear 1, stuck between wanting to act and not being able to start? Cruising in gear 2, finding just enough focus to keep going? Maybe you're in gear 3, firing on all cylinders, not wanting to stop. Or maybe you're downshifting, feeling that focus slip, wondering what happened. Wherever you are, I want you to hear this. The neurodivergent gear system gives us a language to describe a cycle that so many of us have lived without ever understanding. And once you can name what's happening, you can stop blaming yourself for it. This is one of the biggest turning points, when we go from saying, I'm lazy, I'm broken, I'm sabotaging myself, to saying, oh, I think I'm in gear 1 right now. I'm starting to stall. Maybe I need a reset. I was in overdrive all week. No wonder I crashed. And this shift creates space for compassion, for choice, to ask, what does support look like for me right now? The system is not about fixing yourself so much as knowing and honoring your rhythms. Managing our needs as neurodivergents is about recognizing that your brain will shift, stall, and fly, that they're not broken so much as built differently. If this video helped you feel seen, I'd love for you to leave a comment with what gear you're in today, or what your personal shift up strategies look like. And if you want more videos like this, real talk, real tools, and real compassion for autistics and ADHDers, hit subscribe. I've got so much more to share with you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.